Good evening, everybody. It's another Sunday evening, the last Sunday of the month, and we are back and better than ever with another episode of the top 50 classic adventure modules of all time. I am your co-host, Chris, and to my virtual left or right, as usual, is Rick. Rick, say hi to
Hey
everybody.
folks, glad to be back with you. How you doing, Chris? You've got a lot going on.
A lot going on since we've last spoken. Not last spoken, last since we've last been on the screen and everything. Yes, my life is a whirlwind. It's a fact of life. It is what it is. First of all, happy Memorial Day out there for
Yeah.
those of you in the States. Since we've last been here, I've sold my house. My son has got an apartment and will be moving out in a couple of weeks. And my new house is being built. So lots going on. Pretty soon my life will be all about boxes and wrapping things up and everything. The next time you probably won't see a nice, well, you don't see a backdrop because of my curtain thing here now, but yeah, my wall of game will probably be gone. It'll be all probably packed up in boxes the next time that we have this meeting. But doing well. How are you doing, Rick? What's going on in your little corner of New
Doing
Jersey
good.
there?
Yeah, no, keeping busy. Was gaming just yesterday
Oh,
and
nice.
yeah, it's
So
all good.
what are you,
I'm enjoying the
role
weather here.
playing, role playing or board gaming? What were you doing?
Role playing, yeah, fifth
Oh,
edition, groups chugging along through the Temple of Elemental Evil. So
nice.
just had
Awesome.
a encounter in a particularly nasty room with some harpies where one of the party members got separated from the group by a falling portcullis. So
Nice.
and I ended it with now I've gotten into the tradition of ending on a cliffhanger. So basically, this person walked through, triggered a trap, a portcullis fell down, separated him from the party. He is stuck in a room with some harpies, and I ended it there.
Oh,
So
very cool. Very
that's where they'll
cool.
come back next time.
Nice. That's nice. I actually did role playing too this week. We did
Oh,
another
nice.
session of Castle White Rock. And we're gonna be on a pause now because of my life's a little crazy.
Yeah.
But we got pretty much to the end of a level, more or less. They skipped some stuff over, but they're pretty much ready to kind of go down to the next level. So we're
hmm
kind of off to a good spot. But it was actually really cool. We hadn't actually met in like a month, so there was a lot of obviously catch up time with everybody ahead of time, and that was the best part of it. We got to
Sure.
chat and shoot the breeze, talk about movies and stuff like that, and
hmm
TV and the latest things that have been occupying us. So it was all good. It was
Nice.
all good. So but we are here tonight. Enough of the idle chit chat. We are here tonight to talk about numbers 35 to 31. Yes, folks, after tonight, we will be in the 20s
hmm
on our countdown. And this is when it starts getting serious.
Yep.
It's like, we kind of had to get through the 30s, the 40s, and number
Yeah.
50 to kind of get to the good stuff. So, and we've got a very, I'll call it an interesting list tonight. I think
We
it's a
do.
varied list.
Yeah.
And I think there's definitely going to be some surprises on there, but surprises, but not surprises, in my
hmm
opinion. One's probably a surprise. The other one I think is ultimately not really a surprise. So
Yeah.
I think it's all good. So again, if you guys are in the chat, if you guys have experience with any of these adventures, pop in your experiences, or if you agree, disagree, or anything. Hey, also, if you're in the chat there, just pop in where you're coming from, where you're chatting from. We'd love to
hmm
hear that people are like scattered all over the place, and like what time of the day, night, or morning it is at your location. So feel free to pop that in there.
Yeah.
And I don't think Bug Professor is in there yet. But Bug Professor, shout out to you, man. I'm coming. I'm coming to Pennsylvania. There's no turning back now, man. I'm gonna be in your home state. Gonna be in your home state very soon. Also, it's Elena's home state too, isn't it?
hmm
So our producer behind the glass. So we can create a heck of a Pennsylvania gaming group if we wanted to. But
There you go.
let's get right to it. So
All right.
number 35, please cue that up, Elena.
Number 35.
All right.
All right, there it
So
is.
we are back. B6, the Veiled Society. We are back
Mhm.
in the classic B series. This is going to be a great thing at the end of the show to look at some of those classic series and see where how those series ranked up. The A's, the D's, the G's, and now the B's. The B's I think are going to be well represented, I think, by the end of
Mhm.
the time. So uh Rick, why don't you give us a thumbnail with your thoughts about the Veiled Society? Is a different adventure for sure.
Sure. No, definitely. I mean, love the author, David Cook. Can't go wrong there. This one's set in the known world, taking place in the, I would say, oddly small size city of Specularum. I don't know if it was a mistake. They listed the population of 5,000, which is crazy small for a main city, but we'll pass that over. But clearly set in the capital and real change of pace from a lot of adventures at the time because again
Yeah.
1984 you're putting this in an urban environment, sort of taking it out of the dungeon. And I almost feel
Yes.
like that's the, we'll get to that, but I think like that's almost like our pseudo theme for tonight is this sort of political intrigue in a way because or out of the dungeon, you know, maybe is
Yes.
our theme tonight because I feel like that's one of the things that just screams to me from this. um because you're really taking it, it was one of the first adventures I think that
I,
really
I think
went
yes.
there, you
Yes.
know,
Yep.
went
Yep.
into that political intrigue, you know, who
Yeah.
did it, you know,
Truly,
faction.
truly a large city because I mean, you obviously you've got a lot of adventures set in small villages and that like
Yeah.
Hamlet and everything, but this one was literally set in a capital city, urban without a doubt.
Hmm.
And again, I think it was truly like the first one. So
Yeah. So I mean, props to that. You know, I think I see the flaws in it when I look at it. You know, it's one of those things where, again, it's, I think some of these early products, they were groundbreaking for their time. Of course,
yes,
now with so many years of game design behind us, you know, when things look a little railroady, there are some of those sort of railroady elements of the, you know, somebody disappears into the crowd and you can't catch them no matter what kind of stuff going on.
yeah,
Um, but there's some really interesting pieces in here. And plus the module is a little different in that what this thing, I guess about half of it was taken up by
yeah,
these cardboard stand-up
yeah,
buildings. I either never owned this or I owned it, but I never put the buildings together, which I think
yes,
it was the latter. I think I was one of those guys I would never punch stuff out. I half the
yeah,
time I would leave it pristine and then you know, so that's why my Nightstar Terror still has all the chits. You know, it'll
yeah,
one day I'll sell it on eBay and somebody will be happy maybe because all the chits are not punched in. I think it was the same case for this. I think I had the buildings, but I never used them. But that was the conceit here was that you would punch out and stand upright these buildings and do
yeah.
this wonderful little chase scene through these buildings and things. But there's some really nice aspects. So what speaks to you from this particular module?
So first of all, author David Cook, who was awesome, and I think definitely the right type of person to attempt this new kind of an urban crawl, if you will.
Hmm.
I agree with you. Back in the day, it was probably the only urban adventure we had, and it was different in that regard. Now, it's funny back then in the early to mid '80s when I was first learning to be a game master. I often, if something was different, I would shy away from it. I
Hmm.
would be like, no, not for me. I need my dungeon walls. I need to keep it straightforward.
Hmm.
This one, not so much. I actually ran this adventure, and
Mm.
I actually got a kick out of running this adventure, and really, I enjoyed it. Yes, it was railroady, and that's probably why it worked.
Hmm.
For a neophyte game master like myself. But looking back at it now, yeah, you're like, wow, yeah, it was a little rough around the edges,
Hmm.
but still to get a full-blown murder mystery kind of thing and
Yeah.
different factions and everything, a lot of things we take for granted in D&D now. Although I am starting to realize that like Lost City had factions and stuff. Like
Hmm.
factions were definitely a thing back then. They might not have been as much in your face as they are like in 5e,
Yeah.
but I really enjoyed this adventure. Did you
Hmm.
ever run? You obviously didn't. You said you didn't own it or you didn't cut it up. I didn't cut the
Yeah.
pieces
I
out, and we did not do the 3D stuff and everything
Okay.
because I would never go in there and
You're like
desecrate a
me.
book. So
And it's yeah, I never read it. And you kind of raised a good point because this was a module that was written for novice game masters
yeah,
and to incorporate that urban element and mystery element into a novice, that's a really daunting task in a
yeah,
way. That's something that you've got to write it just the right way and maybe it has to be a bit railroady
hmm
because I don't know. Speaking for myself as a DM, I think when I try to run a big city, that's one of the hardest things for me to do
Oh yeah.
because the
Oh yeah.
players can go in a million different directions. There's so many NPCs and shops, and
Yeah.
you never know if a player is suddenly going to say, "Oh, I want to go and buy a meat pie," and now you've got to, riff
Yeah.
something off the top of your head. And it's part of the fun, but it for a new game master, I think it could be a bit daunting. So
Yes. Agreed. Agreed.
certainly Cook had his work cut out here trying to write a novice adventure that went there. So
Yeah.
I think we have to give him props just for having the courage to do that.
Yeah, I think there would have certainly been a benefit if there was a small gazetteer of Specularum and maybe even a section of, hey, here's what happens to get them back on track if they go down and try and get that meat pie, like how do you get them back into the action? But they
Mhm.
clearly didn't have the space because all the space was taken up by the 3D cutouts. And
Yeah.
I guess for the time, I guess that was probably an amazing selling point. We did see that a little bit more. I come to mind the WG series, the Falcon series, I believe,
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
had some cutout stuff and everything, and that was also an urban adventure, and very much a mystery kind of thing. So,
Hmm.
I think that was its shtick, but it was definitely for its time. I just remember not being scared of it back then, and
Hmm.
actually, running it and actually having a really good time
Hmm.
actually running it and being very thrilled with it actually and how it
Mm.
came out. And it's one of the adventures that I was always like, we really need to give this one the talking TSR treatment, but we never did.
Yeah. Yeah.
And looking back on it now, I'm like, wow, since half of it was the cutouts and everything, unless we did a little cut and paste craft time on our show, we might have had time talking about it for a full hour because there's not a whole lot of meat on those bones outside of those cutouts.
No,
So
it's not a particular when you exclude the,
yeah,
handouts, it's not a large adventure. I don't know how
yeah.
many pages,
I
but
think
I
it's
mean
like 14
short.
pages or something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah,
I mean,
something. Yeah,
it's a short adventure, but there's some interesting things in there. There's a riot scene which I really
yeah.
like. I think it's great for breaking up the action. The players can get involved and impact where things go. There's a chase scene in
There's
there
a
where,
chase.
there's some things going on with that. And I always am interested when I see a chase scene done in an
Hmm.
adventure. And because I've seen them done a bunch of different ways with different rules. I mean, the original DMG did have sort of foggy rules on chasing. I don't know. I mean, I've seen it done a lot of different ways. Oddly enough, I think the best chase rules I've ever seen were in the James Bond RPG because they had some really
Yes.
interesting rules for chase in there, which I think have yet to be matched. But certainly an interesting take on that. But the chase and the riot really breaks up the action and it kind of, gets things going in a different direction so things don't feel samey. And I love that.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. Yeah, it's a solid entry. It's a solid entry. I guess I'm a little bit surprised it's this high on our list.
Hmm.
I'm
I
not
am too.
surprised it made the list, but I'm like, wow, man,
Yeah.
number 35. I'm like, that's pretty strong work. I mean, and once we start hitting those, keep in mind, folks, the next session in, we're going to be in the top 30, and the classic measuring stick to that is the Dungeon Magazine 2004 top
Yeah.
30 list. So we're going to be in some rarefied air very soon. So,
Hmm.
so yeah, I'm thrilled to see this one make the list, and a little bit surprised it made it this high.
I am
Quick
too.
shout outs to DW Gable, coming from wait, not Toronto. That's Akron, Ohio, home of Devo, the Pretenders, and Black Keys, and him. And then also Dice Station Zebra, chatting in from Toronto, not all that far from Akron or Pennsylvania. True that. Glad to hear that you guys are joining us tonight. So,
Yeah.
any final words on number 35, The Veiled Society?
No, I think we can roll to the next one, though. I do want to acknowledge that Dice Station Zebra did mention that page count can be deceiving, and
Yes.
that's so true. Because how many
Yep.
times have we talked about the original Giant
Yep.
Adventures,
Yes.
say,
8 pages
where they would
long.
have
Yeah.
8 pages, and there was so much meat on those eight
Yep.
pages
Yes.
that you could go 10 sessions with those 8 pages. So
Yeah.
absolutely true. All right, I think we're ready to go to the next one.
All right. We're ready to queue up number 34.
Number 34.
Our first DCC
Yeah.
RPG adventure makes an appearance, Sailors on the Starless Sea. You knew there was going to be at least one on this list, to be honest with you. Well, we'll see. But I mean, a
Yeah.
list that's put together by Goodman Games, crowd, there's definitely going to be some love being thrown to this. So yeah, a
Yeah.
couple of us might have experience in this one. Classic Sleepy Fingers. Yes, very very
I think
true,
more than
very
a
true.
couple.
So this is the one that kicked it all off. It is actually, it's funny. I thought it was the second DCC adventure. It was the first though. Actually, it's
Yeah.
funny because number 66 actually was still a fourth edition adventure. I'd forgotten about that. So and written by nobody else that could do this that is Harley Stroh. And I mean, if you, I mean, again, it is the quintessential DCC adventure. Whenever somebody comes up and says, "Well, what is DCC RPG?" I mean, don't give them the big fat rule book and say, "Here it is." Give them this adventure
Hmm.
because this adventure has everything in it. I mean, it,
Yeah.
it feels like D&D, but it's not.
Right. Yeah.
It feels like Appendix N. It feels like Conan. It feels
Hmm.
like it feels like all of them. Dying Earth, Lankmar,
Hmm.
it all wrapped together. It's just, and you can see the influences and everything. And it's great. I reread it this week.
Hmm.
It was great reread. One of the things that I'm going to bring up, and we talked about this all the time. Uh, how can you tell if an adventure is really good? Is if it's been reprinted over the
Yep.
years, and if it's also been converted to other systems. So, for
Yeah.
example, I mean, Strahd, Curse of Strahd,
Hmm.
and it's been reprinted like all the time, and it's
Yeah.
like there's always a new version of it. It's because it's a classic, and Keep on the Borderlands and the Giants and
Yep.
everything. And this is, I didn't even realize this, that there is how many printings of this adventure? Can anybody in the chat guess what printing number Sailors of the Starless Sea is on? We'll give it a second or two, as I say, but it is stunning. Now there's a sequel. The 2022 Gen Con tournament was a sequel to Sailors of the Starless Sea. I still don't see any guesses in there. I see 11 printing Sleepy Fingers. I'm going to give you a hint. You're not far off. You are
Not
not far
far.
off. That is, it's crate 12. I have a 12 in there. I mean, most adventures in the RPG space don't get reprinted a second time. And
Yeah.
some of the really good ones get printed a second, a third, and maybe
Yeah.
a fourth time. And I'm gonna spill the beans here. I'm gonna spill the beans. Sailors on the Starless Sea is in its ninth printing, and if I'm not mistaken, it's sold out or almost sold out, and we're already probably looking at a 10th printing
Yeah.
coming. So you guys are very close, Sleepy Fingers, and
Yeah.
and if we're doing prices right rules, you guys are over, so we can't win. You don't win anything. But anyway, you guys are very close. So that's just mind-boggling.
It
And
is.
this was in 2012, so it has been around for
Hmm.
14 years now. So,
Yeah.
Rick, do you
It's
have any
classic.
experience with this adventure?
I do not. I have never run it. But like you said, first off, folks, if you see an adventure that goes through, like Chris said, multiple printings, just buy it,
Yeah,
honestly,
yeah. Doesn't
because
matter the
there's a
system.
reason. And
Yeah,
when
doesn't matter the
adventure
system.
sells that much, there's usually a reason. You mentioned the first most important thing, which is Harley. Harley Stroh has his own unique style, obviously a very prolific author, but having read Harley's stuff and worked with Harley, back in the 3.5 days, this is really his style. This is
Yeah,
almost what I
yeah,
always felt like he was always writing, I think,
yes,
DCC
yes.
RPG before there was a
I,
DCC
I was
RPG,
I was gonna mention that
you
back in
know,
his
because
3E
it's just
days.
so
Yep,
him.
yep,
Even the language he would use,
yes,
I would always smile reading, because you would always see words like eldritch, or I would make a game out of it, like a drinking
yeah,
game. Every time I would see the word fetid, I would take a
yeah,
drink,
yep,
because Harley would use these words that you would see in these classic books. And it was just, it's one of those things that rereading this, I just found myself grinning like an idiot, because
yeah,
there's a sense of fun that boils out of the pages of this. And that's, it's a very, it's got a lot of different elements. It flows because it's very sandboxy in one
mm-hmm,
part, and then you get a
yes,
very dungeon element, and then
yep,
for a low level adventure, which it is super low level, it's like just a zero level funnel, really. You get this crazy big over the top ending.
yeah,
The kind of thing you'd expect to see at 10th level, you get at
yes,
low level, which just blows. Again, only Harley would be like audacious enough to pull that off, and he wraps it all in this one package.
Yeah.
So there's no surprise for me. I'm absolutely expected it would be on this list, and it is absolutely worthy of being where it's at because you read this and like I said, I smile when it's one of those some adventures you read and they're dry and a little more academic, and even some of Gygax's things are a little more clinical, I guess, or a little more dry, the tone. And this is one of these ones where it's just fun. You can read it and you can feel people there are stories about this adventure, reading it at the table. I can only imagine how many players have crazy stories, of what they've gone through in this adventure. You could probably write a book of just people's experiences because you read it and you can feel it through the text. That's the sense I get from this.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Everything you said is spot on there. And it's just like it comes through. It just oozes through, and it is just it's just a great adventure. Riddle me this. Would it make a good 5th edition adventure?
Interesting.
It's like I'm sure you gotta do some tweaking here and there, but it might work. It might work. It could be interesting. But for something to have this many printings and to be so beloved, and you just talk to folks at a convention, and you're actually hard pressed to find some folks at a convention that are familiar with DCC that actually haven't played it already. It's one of those. It's definitely the keep on the borderlands of the DCC system, without a doubt. And that's probably a lesson to say that if you're actually writing the first adventure or the introductory adventure of a brand new RPG, if that RPG becomes successful, your adventure is probably going to become successful because because it's going to be the one that everybody plays. We talked about that with The Haunting and Call of Cthulhu.
Yep.
I'm sure that Keep on the Borderlands is going to be high up on this list.
Yeah.
When it's all said and done. You're right. Rereading it and everything, you can see the inspirations, you can feel the inspirations, the Appendix N inspirations that Harley pulled from. And because you are so right. I've reviewed actually some of Harley's older 3rd edition stuff, and because he wrote actually a bonus module for Castle White and it doesn't read like a Castle White additional level. It reads like a DCC, not a funnel, but it just reads like an Appendix N kind of thing, and it just happens to be attached and associated with that. So it's amazing. So folks, if you've not played Sailors on the Starless Sea, or if you've not picked up a copy of it, do so. And that is the beauty of doing this list. I have already purchased a couple of adventures that are on this list that I was not familiar with. That because I'm like, look at this. I'm like, wow, I need to check this out, even though I might not play that system, or it's been a while or whatever. That's the beauty of this. So hopefully
I purchased some PDFs tonight because of our list tonight.
There you go.
Literally before we got on the air, maybe an hour ago.
Yeah.
I ordered a couple PDFs because I was so intrigued that I said I have to read this whole thing, and we'll get to that. But absolutely.
So cool. No, I'm looking forward to that. There's a little tease there, folks. There you
go.
Didn't get too much better than that. So Sailors in the Starless Sea. This is great. I forgot. I'm gonna need to email Harley tomorrow or Tuesday, I guess, and let him know that he made the list. He'll probably be excited about that, and that he actually his name is up there with the likes of David Cook and Gygax and all the other greats that are going to grace our list by the end of it. So, any other comments on? So you've never played Sailors in the Starless Sea?
No, I
have not
never.
Either,
and I'm kind of honestly at this point, I feel like if I want to play it, I have to somehow wrangle away where Harley is running it.
Yeah. So
because I think that would be the way to do it. Because again, if you've ever met Harley, he has a wonderful energy to him, and he's a nice guy, and he's, for a guy with so many credits under his belt and everything, he's a humble guy too. He's like just you understand where the fun is when you run. So I would love to see him. I would love to just sit in a room actually and watch him run this. I think that would be interesting,
Oh yeah, that's good. Oh yeah, we pay money for that. Maybe we're missing. Could be a revenue stream here that we're not aware of. We stream it or something. Put it on Twitch. So.
There we go. Yeah, pay per view.
Yeah, pay per view. Watch Harley run.
Watch Harley run it.
Yeah, Oh, sounds good. All right, so that's going to wrap up number 34. So we are going to move along to number 33 coming up next.
Number 33.
Of course, mid drink of water. So, all right, D3, the Vault of the Drow. So that makes it official now. We've gotten all the D's on
We
here.
have first
And
series, really.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I think it worked. I think it worked because Vault of the Drow I think is definitely. I mean, you and I really like D2 a lot, but
Yeah.
Vault of the Drow,
Oh, knew it would be on
again,
the list. Yeah.
yeah, we knew this was
No
going to be on the
question.
list. Again, this is a tricky one. Probably would have been higher on the list, except for the fact it's. And we've talked about this when we did our breakdown on Talking TSR. You should go check that video out because it was a good
Yeah.
video. Not really an adventure, more of a setting. I mean, there's an adventure there. There's a key. There's things to fight and everything. But it was definitely more setting forward and certainly not railroady at all.
No.
Probably could have used a few more cues, probably could have used a couple more pages to actually give a little bit more direction on how to run it. And again, much like I embraced running Veiled Society for my group, probably because it was low level, it was probably a little bit easier to digest than that. I was scared to death of this adventure, but I so wanted to run my group through the entire G's, D's, and Q that I knew I had to get through this one. And I know I told this story before, but I kind of got my players through this one kind of as quickly as I could because I kind of didn't know how to handle it. Because
Yeah.
again, it was more setting and less actually adventure. I kind of got them to the Fane of Loth like pretty quickly.
Yep.
And kind of got them through that gate and got them off to Q1, which was God, Q1 wasn't even a traditional adventure in the true sense of the word. But anyway, I felt more comfortable running that one. So
It's funny you say that because my experience was identical. I remember opening this module because I was like you, when you said earlier that you were used to the walls of the dungeon. And
yes, very much
I
so.
remember, I'm one of those guys that I would get the module and I would open it up, and the first thing I would look at would be the blue map. And I remember opening it up and seeing this hex map and almost feeling disappointed and saying to myself, what is this? And then when I read it, it was interesting, but it just became so daunting that I did run players through this. But it was just like what you said. I remember the players did not romp all over the vault. My players basically went to the Black Tower, ransacked that, and kind of made a beeline from that to the Fane. And I don't even remember really doing much of the city. It was like very linear, just they went to the Fane as quickly as possible, and I was happy to get them as quickly as possible because at the time I wasn't capable of running this properly. I think.
Agreed. Yeah.
And it's even now I think for all that's there, it's work for the DM. I think even though there's so much setting material there, a lot of it is for me dry lists of statistics, and you get a lot of this dark elf has got a +1 this and a +2 that, and you get like the armaments, but you really need to inject a lot of personality and motivation. There's so much more that could have been put in here.
And
I read it and
maps.
I wish it was twice as long.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. I was gonna say, I know this is what we always say, this adventure would benefit from another 5 or 10 pages. This one would benefit from another 32 pages, basically.
Seriously.
Yeah, and a bunch of maps and a bunch
Yeah.
of,
Yeah.
you could have easily done that because you're right, because it really comes off almost as like
Yeah.
just stat dumps and bullet points, kind of here's the stats, here's the treasure,
Yeah.
move on. And it's like even if they would have just detailed like one of the merchant houses like really well,
Right.
and then giving you the
Exactly.
summary of the other ones, and then
Yeah.
detail a couple of the other, like one of the noble houses, their compounds really well. Like here's how you could do the
Yeah.
noble compound, instead of just saying you got an 8, you got a 12th level cleric,
Right.
5th level fighter leader, and then you got this that. I mean, that I get it. You need that information if you're going to start fighting and everything, but having a few maps, and
Yeah.
again, back in that, it was 1978. Back then, the thought process was, who would ever buy something that would be published like this? Like you would create it all on your own. So
Yeah.
putting together, we talked about this with the nodes in Temple of Mental Evil. that list at the end there. Here's a map, here's a list of what the things is.
Yeah.
And basically it's like, go figure it out, like populate it all, have fun. Like that was supposed to be the game master's, that's the game that the game master plays, was
Right.
filling that all out and creating all that. And that was very much the thought of this one as well. It was like,
Yeah.
here's the skeleton of some things.
Oh yeah.
But there was more though. There was areas that there was so much detail on,
Yeah.
and you were like, wow, what am I going to do with this page of information on the Black Tower? And
Well, it
so
just left me yearning for more. I mean, it was
yes,
absolutely an error that there wasn't a lot of DM handholding for sure.
no,
But what I would have given, even back in the day when I originally bought this, for a map of the city, for a
yep,
map of the sewers, just something to work. Like you said, an example of a house. And even the big bad, I know, again, folks, I would totally refer you to our Talking TSR episode because we really go in depth here. But the villain, the Klavdra, which was kind of the big bad or one of the big bads throughout the whole, I mean, she's really the kind of head of the whole conspiracy that, that runs through the giants. It all comes back to her. She appears in here. She's listed. If you haven't somehow killed her in the Giant series, they list her, in her house here. But the motivations of her house, her tactics, all that stuff, none of that's really explained. You're basically just given, again, raw statistics for the big bad. And it's confusing. I think back in the time when I originally had this, I didn't even understand that. You're led to believe that Loth and the Thane is kind of the big bad,
mm-hmm,
when really it's all about a Klavdra trying to build forces above ground so she can subvert what's going on in the vault, for her own purposes, and because her house is following the Elder Elemental Eye instead of Loth. And you've got this whole factional thing, like you said, factions. You've got this whole factional thing going on that I'm not even sure it's clear, because it's almost like a footnote
mm-hmm,
that a lot of people wouldn't even realize. And then later, when it was kind of regrouped and represented as Queen of Spiders, I mean, you had right on the cover, Queen of Spiders. So
mm-hmm.
anybody looking at that is going to think, all right, Loth is the big bad. And she kind of really wasn't. And it's difficult for a DM, I think. At the time, it was a lot of work. But again, I think a cool, obviously an enduring villain, a Klavdra, the name
Mm-hmm.
came up a lot later. She came and played a starring role in the Slavers series because she started the Slavers with,
Mm-hmm.
Stelman Kiln and all that. So they obviously thought she was cool enough to bring her back. But how I wish there was more meat there, more motivations written out and tactics and, things like that.
Yeah. And I mean, and then the first three giant modules in that series, you got a big boss battle. It was
Yeah.
very clear who the big boss was at the
Yeah.
end of the adventure, and each of them were sometimes in the second room. But like, and then you got to the D series, and it kind of flipped it upside down. Like in D1, there wasn't a big bad. It was just a collection of random
Yep.
monsters that we've talked about and everything. You could make the argument maybe the Lich is the big bad, but not really. He was a lich
Yeah,
kind of,
not
was a
really.
lich in a niche, kind of off to the side, doing some stuff on his own. And then in D2 again, you did have kind of a big bad there. You had the Prince King or whatever,
Hmm.
sort of. But then in D3 you didn't, and then you're back at Q1. So it was a little bit confusing, I
Hmm.
think. And you're right, it was just scary to run. But it's like the whole series was so compelling that you just couldn't resist doing it and taking the challenge and everything. And I just remember, not my fondest couple of sessions probably when they were adventuring through that module, but still, had to get from point A to point B to kind of finish everything off. And you make a great point about a Cloudra's role and how it probably should have been highlighted more and everything. And it'd be really curious to kind of compare the Queen of Spiders G1
Hmm.
through 7, and how, because they obviously had some extra page count to actually fill
Yeah.
some things out, and just see if they did a better job at that or not, or
Yeah.
set up. I do remember the Slaver series book. Was that against the Slave Lords? The big
Yeah.
ginormous
The
one.
big
They
collection.
filled that out with a
Oh
lot of
yeah.
extra material, but it was only
Yeah.
four adventures. It was only four
Yeah.
adventures that they filled out to a 128-page book, whereas
Yeah.
this one you were going 100 128 pages, but you were going 7 adventures, so that was a
Right.
little bit harder.
Yeah,
So
the Slaver book I loved because, not to
yes,
get off point, but they started with a wonderful house party. Honestly, the only I don't remember a lot of differences in Queen of Spiders, even with the extra page.
I
The
don't remember either. I don't
the
recall.
only detail I'm riffing here, the only detail I remember that they sort of changed or clarified is I guess it's at the end of G3, you find the map, you find the Drow map on the
Mhm.
ground.
Yeah,
And they kind of say, was it accidentally left? Was it
yeah,
forgotten? And in Queen of Spiders, if you look up that detail where the map is found at the end of G3, they actually say it was purposely left there
yeah,
by one faction member in case things went south, that they were hoping, frankly, that the players would come to the vault and cause trouble, which
yeah,
is really interesting. Like they really took it I think in a different direction in Queen of Spiders, that little detail. Just a little tiny thing, but just in a couple sentences, they really spun things around a bit. But that's the only thing I can remember off the top of my head. So yeah, it would be like you said, it would be really interesting to go back now and kind of look at that extra material and see if they clarified what they.
yeah. Agreed. What was your favorite part of this adventure? Do you remember?
Oh, that's a good question. My favorite part, honestly, was the small hex encounter areas on the
Mm,
way to the vault.
yeah,
I loved all three of them. The fabulously hard Succumbi vampire encounter
yes,
is classic, and could be devastatingly deadly if you run it properly. And then there's a nasty little spider encounter with this gruesome cursed spider idol. And I love that too, because even though you could say it's just a bunch of spiders in a cave, by introducing these creepy spiders and the spider idol, it just sets the stage for this, the whole loath thing later. So it's a good little amuse bouche for what's coming up.
yeah.
So those are my favorite, honestly. I really love those three little encounter areas that the players can kind of stumble into.
Nice. That's very cool. I really like the hidden hex, the river where the harbor was, where the ships
Oh
were.
yeah,
There was like
yeah,
two
with the
ships, and
boat.
it was like it was like an evil ship. It was like the ship was possessed by a spirit or something or whatever. They could command the ship could go upstream or something. It was
Mhm.
due to the malevolence of Loth or whatever. But I love that because it was
Yeah,
literally the river kind of goes into the cavern wall or whatever, and then it opens up and there's this little cave that's totally hidden, a
Mhm.
little hidden Easter egg that like very few people probably ever found, but it was
Yeah.
cool and it made sense that they had that. It
Well,
totally
and
makes sense.
if you weren't going to Q1, I guess it gave you some place to go
It
too, because
did.
technically
It
your
did.
players could get on the boat and
Yep.
go to the,
Like,
underground sea or
yep,
wherever.
which was off in that
Yeah.
direction, the Sunless Sea, yeah, off in that general direction. So yes, that's it. Card man 2467. The figurehead could change into a demon. I
That's
remember that.
right.
Yes,
Right.
I
What was
remember
it, a
that. Yeah.
Nicodemon or something? It was
Yeah, it's
I
like
can't remember.
yeah, I remember that. That was probably my favorite encounter. And again, because a lot of it, there wasn't a whole lot of encounter stuff going on there. The Fane was pretty cool. I mean, the Fane
Mhm.
was pretty awesome in the fact that Loth was actually there too, which was kind of exciting. That you could actually have her kind of be a part of that adventure, and then the whole getting through the amber wall to go to the abyss and everything. So
Mhm.
that was amazing. So really like that. So we are definitely seeing some trends on our list here. We've
Yeah.
seen a lot of the G's and the D's now. We've seen a lot of I've seen several entries from the B's already. So yeah, I mean, we haven't seen any of the S's yet, right? And we haven't
Not yet.
seen, yeah, so there's still some more to come. There's definitely
Yeah.
some
We
some
got
more
some
to come.
important letters still
There
left in
is,
the
there
alphabet.
totally is. Yes, some definitely important letters to come. So, I think that wraps us up for number 33, Vault of the Drow. I think we're gonna move on to number 32.
Number 32.
All right. Okay. So
All right.
this surprises me. This surprises
Mhm.
me. Again, there could be some Goodman Games bias going on here. Because this adventure, N4 Treasure Hunt, first of all, it was a later one, 1986. And a lot of people I don't think are very familiar with this adventure. Now, we
Yeah.
did a whole episode on it
Yep.
because we love it to death. I mean, this is the original funnel,
Yeah.
essentially, in my opinion. This is
Hmm.
kind of what, was a very strong inspiration for what would become the DCC RPG. And I remember specifically when I finished writing DCC number 7, and Joe came to me and said, "Remember that zero level adventure that they did?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, and 4, that's a really good one," and everything. He's like, "I want that." And I remember writing a zero level third edition adventure back in the day, DCC number 100, and this was clearly my inspiration, without a doubt. This is a personal favorite for mine. I love this adventure to death. It's simplistic, I think, but it,
Hmm.
it had to be because you start out, captured, no equipment, and you shipwreck and everything, and then you have to kind of survive. And then, but what they did with the island and the direction they took with the island,
Hmm.
was just fascinating, I thought, and just it was just a great way to kick off a campaign. I mean, I think a lot of people use this to kick a campaign off,
Hmm.
and you could have had a whole campaign on that island, but just to start things off. So
Yeah.
let me hear your high level. What did you, first of all, did you ever play this one or run it?
I never played it.
Really?
Definitely owned it and read it. For whatever reason, we never started with this one. I think we
Really?
always started with the bees, and we just
Yeah.
kind of went on from there. Uh, like you said, as a sort of looking at it now as a sort of zero level funnel, just fascinating concept to have no starting class, no real
Yeah.
alignment or anything. And kind of the player's actions would dictate where the characters ended up, which I think is just it's so interesting. Rather than have somebody just pick their class, here
Hmm.
you could actually have almost their experiences in the module kind of steer it to a class, which is just it's a fascinating idea.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you'd have to find the right players willing to kind of, but I think if you started a campaign with this, I think that could be something really wonderful, something very organic. Um, like you said, I guess befitting its funnel status, certainly deadly in areas. Um, but yeah, I have a soft spot for this one because anything that's on any kind of island thing, I always tend to like. I do remember, like, I wish the maps had been a little more engaging. There's some elements here that I wish had been a little more, done out a little differently. But overall, I think it's a really interesting package, and it's one of those modules that really flies under the radar. A lot of
It
people have
does.
not heard. I mean, we
Yeah.
talk often about um how Knights Dark Terror,
Yep.
flies under. Well, this one is another one that
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
if you go out and you just say, because you could say Vault of Drow and everybody knows what you're talking about. But
Yeah.
if you say treasure hunt, people go, what? Or if
Yep.
you say N4, people don't immediately go, the way they
Yeah.
would if you said G3, they don't really click, when you say N4. So it definitely flew under the radar.
Yeah. I think a couple reasons for that. A, the title, Treasure Hunt.
Hmm.
Don't think that was the greatest title, to
No,
be honest with
no.
you. I don't think that really, I mean, yes, treasure hunt, but no, it was really more about survival, and it
Survival. I
was
was just
really
going to
more
say, you
about
need survival in there.
finding your way.
Yeah.
Secondly, N4 was the end of the series, much like B10, Knights Artera was at the very near the end of the series. N1 was amazing. All right. N1 was against the cult of the reptile god.
Yeah.
N2, the Forest Oracle, arguably one of the worst adventures ever written. And
Yeah.
there's been some great, and if you guys don't believe me on this, there's some great reviews of that module N2 of like just the problems with it. Again, back in the
There
80s, I
are.
never realized it. I
Yeah.
never realized I actually kind of liked Forest Oracle. I've run Forest Oracle and I thought it was fine. But like nowadays, it's like there were some glaring issues with that one. N3, does anybody even remember what N3 is? It's like, is that Destiny of the Kings or something, or the King's Destiny or something? It was
Yeah.
a it was a political intrigue adventure that really, really went deep into political intrigue, and like to the point where it was like it didn't feel like it was a D&D adventure, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
So I think that was part of the thing. I think by that point, by the time N3 came around, people had given up on the N series, I think. And then then N4
yeah,
comes on
right.
great. And then there was an N5 too, which was a Forgotten Realms adventure, which was actually
That's
quite good
right.
as well.
You're right.
Under Illifarn, I believe it was.
Yeah. Yeah. N was a very,
Yeah.
the N series just sort of
Up or
meandered
down.
around.
Yeah, it did meander around and everything, but I think that's part of it. I think that title and everything, and the fact that the two previous ones are really not all that compelling. I think probably had something to do with it. I love the way that they used the deity in this adventure, the
Hmm.
island deity, and they kept it vague so that you could put it in your own campaign world. They kept it specifically vague on like who the deity was. But the fact that you're on the island and you're surviving and you're like, oh wow, there's something else going on in this island. But then
Hmm.
basically that the goddess was basically, well, you got 24 hours and I'm gonna like wipe
Hmm.
this island off existence. So like it gave you that, it gave you that ticking clock
Yeah.
of we can't just run. To be honest with you, I probably would have given them more than one day, but but like because it's like wow, it's like we were just shipwrecked this morning and now we have one day to like totally become first level characters, find our way, get a boat, get out of here. Anyway, but I think it was that extra special something that really kind of
Hmm.
elevated it and put it over the top,
Hmm.
in my opinion, because it's like if you I think the adventure would have been fine without that clicking talk, that
Yeah.
ticking clock. Um but I think that part just added that just brought it up
Oh,
to
yeah.
an amazing adventure.
Yeah.
And I really liked it. And the NPCs and the way that they, like you said, the tracking system that every time you tried to like pick
Yeah.
a lock or something, you'd mark it down and be like, oh,
Hmm.
maybe that's a thief, a
Yeah.
thief in training or something there. So
But you're
um,
right. Yeah. Very, very like James Bond ending potential here.
yes,
Oh,
yes,
for
very much
sure.
so. But I thought it was good. I thought it kind of worked. I thought
Hmm.
it definitely, and it was, like I said, it was a different adventure. By all means, it was one of the later ones in '86. It was kind
Hmm.
of the heyday of TSR was kind of winding down. They were kind of figuring, well, I guess we're going to do another edition or whatever,
Hmm.
and there was a transition of power, at TSR, so it was a little bit of a troubling time there, kind of coming in, and definitely the golden age had passed at that point. So, yeah. Any other final thoughts on N4 Treasure Hunt? Just a
No,
marvelous adventure.
it's a really interesting module because again, going with our theme tonight, getting you out of the dungeon, so to speak, and just, throwing you into a very different environment, which we're gonna continue, I guess, with our next pick. So
Yeah, certainly. All right, so we have one more for tonight. We are going to be revealing number 31 coming up next.
Number 31.
All right. Yeah, so a lot of people are probably looking at the
there's
screen kind of
something
funny, like
different.
saying, "What is that?" And it's
Yeah.
like Shadows over, let's see if I get this right. Uh Bogenhafen, I think.
That's the way, yeah,
Bogenhafen?
that's the way I say it, is
Yeah,
almost like
Bogenhafen.
burger without the R. I say burger, like I don't know.
Yes.
I'm Italian, German, and American Indian, so I'm gonna go with the German. And I would say, Bogenhafen.
So,
So
so who had this one on their pool for the top 50? This was surprising. This was great that this was first of all, Warhammer Fantasy RPG,
Mhm.
1987. So that was Games Workshop back in the day, I believe. I think that
Yeah.
was the company.
Yep.
Yes. And so this is great that we were kind of hoping we were going to get some non-TSR
Hmm.
adventures and non-D&D adventures, and this is it. I'll be honest with you, I had no background with this adventure whatsoever. I have no idea. I've never played Warhammer. I played Blood Bowl. That's about as close as I get to it, and it's not close. Except for I guess some of the teams are kind of named from the regions and stuff like that. But so I have no familiarity with this at all. So I watched videos, I looked up some reviews, and I desperately want to own this campaign now,
Hmm.
because this was like part two of a 5-part campaign or whatever.
Yeah,
And created by some very familiar folks,
for sure.
Graham Davis.
Yep.
amongst them. The UK group, obviously, that created many of the very popular UK and the U adventures
Yeah.
for D&D. So yeah, oh, we got three-eyed cat. I played this. It was great. It was Warhammer. Yes, Warhammer it is indeed.
Yep.
But yeah, so I'm gonna throw this right back to you, Rick. Rick, do you have any experience with this adventure at all?
I did not own it, did not play it. Um, I only know the overall campaign by reputation.
Okay, so you were
Uh,
aware of it.
yeah, oh yeah,
Okay, I was
because
not even aware of it.
yeah, because it honestly it always stuck out to me because whenever you review or whenever I would see these kind of top adventure lists, if somebody would post
Yep,
a more generalized list like this one that takes it outside of D&D,
yep,
the enemy within always shows up.
yep.
And I would always, it frankly got to a point where I was just like, what is this enemy within that keeps, especially the fact that it was Warhammer just struck me as odd, because again, I'm just conditioned to think of D&D, and when something beyond one of the really heavyweight titles like D&D or Call of Cthulhu, when you go outside that realm and you start pulling in, Warhammer or RuneQuest or something different, my eyes open up.
Mm-hmm.
And this is Enemy Within campaign is cited on many top lists. Like you said, I mean, it's got a wonderful pedigree. Graham Davis has written a lot of wonderful stuff, and of course, he was one of the designers of the actual first edition Warhammer Fantasy
Yep.
itself. So you couldn't have somebody better writing this. Um, and I think overall as a product, it's wonderful. I think this is the one that when I referenced earlier when I said I bought something today, that was this. Because yeah, I basically want to get into all the parts of it.
Yeah.
Now it is very uneven. I think there's definitely maybe more people who like the overall campaign idea, but then when you ask them about specific parts, some parts are better than others. This is one of the higher points, I think, of the campaign.
Yeah. Agreed.
This is considered one of the better chapters or parts or whatever you want to call it of the Enemy Within campaign. Because I know like there's something rotten in, I'm gonna say Kislev, I think it's pronounced.
Yes. Yep.
That one I know was originally designed as a standalone and was kind of shoehorned in just because of whatever was going on at Games Workshop or whatever at the time. They decided to shoehorn it in, and it really, evidently, a lot of players, from what I've read, do not like that even being a part of this campaign. And with the recent Cubicle 7 kind of resurrection of this, which is a wonderful thing that came out, I guess, in, I don't know, 2009 or 2019. They even just omitted it. They just replaced it. They took that fifth chapter completely out and they replaced it with a chapter called The Horned Rat, because they made no sense. The whole thing takes place in this empire, and then this one chapter would have you running to a different place, and then the DM had to worry about getting back to the empire. But this particular chapter, it's great. There's a lot of interesting gritty details, kind of the way Starless Sea gives that DCC-RPG vibe. Reading this absolutely gives me that, right? Gives you that Warhammer vibe. Somewhere I had read that Graham Davis and the other designers, when they were writing Warhammer Fantasy, they used the term grubby fantasy was the term they used when they were writing it. And it's best term. It's like the best. I've heard grimdark and these other, forget that. Grubby fantasy is a wonderful way to put it, because growing up on D&D adventures, I feel like I need a bath after reading this adventure, because you're reading about alcoholic dwarves and people in stocks, and there's so many machinations going on, and you're really getting like the dark part of the city. But I love all the details. There's so many good, interesting nuggets in here that I want to get the latest thing. I want to basically acquire the director's cut of this. And just read it to death. Because the last chapter too, I believe they've completely revised, because I know the Empire in Flames was the last chapter, and a lot of people felt like again, because of what was going on at war, Games Workshop was basically closing down their RPG operations at the time that was being written, and evidently it was rushed and it was kind of a mess. And they evidently recognized that. So now Graham Davis has kind of basically completely rewrote that ending and made it a lot better. So I really and am interested in digging into the whole thing and seeing how the whole thing flows.
Yeah. So this one, we talked about this. This one was originally published in 87, republished in 89, republished in 95, republished in 2017, and then Cubicle 7 got the rights to it in 2019, and they've been putting out the director's cut that you mentioned since then. So I had the same thing when this one first popped up. I had to figure out, well, what is this? I need to, how am I not aware of this?
Yeah.
And obviously it was Warhammer, and I never played it, so that was why. But when I started digging into this, I had the same thought that you did. I'm like, I gotta run out and buy this PDF. But then when I found out that Cubicle 7 did this director's cut, and then they have this fancy slipcase edition, 10
Oh,
book
yeah.
slipcase edition with alternate covers with like foil UV treatment on them and everything.
No, the
And
whole
like,
thing's, if you bought, I think it was like 10 volumes for like $750 or something.
yes,
Like
it's
this
exactly.
crazy
It's
big
it's
set.
absolutely crazy, but I like want that. Like I didn't buy the PDF because I think I want like the director's cut like amazingness and
Yeah.
everything. So
Yeah.
so I'm kind of basically saving myself. But normally I would have gone out and bought the PDF and read the PDF and everything, but I didn't. I relied on just reviews and everything for this video. But this will be by the end of the year, this will be, I don't know where my shelf will be, but I'll have a game shelf somewhere, hopefully in my new house. And this will proudly, at least, version the book number 1 and book number 2, the companion for it, will be on those shelves at some point
Nice.
because I've just heard so many good things about it.
Yeah.
And it just seems amazing.
Yeah.
It's apparently I read apparently there was a nice full color map of like the city, which was amazing. Apparently it's set around a fair, so it's not a stereotypical dungeon crawl, and basically one of the carnies escapes and you're hired to go track the carny down. The carny goes into the sewers, and then you stumble upon basically like a nefarious plot. I won't spoil everything, but basically it's not just a simple, you stumble into a basically a mystery, and then you're starting to figure it out. And again, we talked about factions. Oh, there are factions.
Oh,
Apparently,
yeah.
there are NPCs galore. And apparently it's just it's apparently it's amazing. This, at least this section of it. And I am just so excited about it. There's, again, it's not perfect. Keep in mind, written back in the 80s, but the mere fact that they did a director's cut and Graham Davis is involved in it, so they've added like designer notes to it and things and sidebars and everything. I love that kind of stuff. I eat that kind of stuff up to kind of hear about all these different cool little things, like what the original intent was, what this, why they did what they did. So yeah, I mean, I heard it's got its flaws, but I am all about this. I'm loving about the big
I totally agree. I eat up those designer notes. And I even read with this latest incarnation that they've got, but they're calling Grognark. I'm going to give them a free kickback here. That there's Grognark boxes. That basically, if you've had people who've already played through it, they give you little tips for changing elements to surprise, which I think is it's such a cool touch. So yeah, I absolutely, like you said, I'm a hardcover guy, so I'd much rather have the physical version than any kind of. I'm not a PDF reader. I like to hold a book in my hands and read it. So somehow I have to find a way to get my hands on these, because this one is supposed to be a high point, and from what I understand, Power Beyond the Throne, which is the 4th, I think, chapter, is very NPC. It's one of those things. Lots of paths, intrigue, tons of NPCs. Basically, if the DM has the chops to pull it off, and you're into that more like Game of Thrones style RPGing, it's supposed to be wonderful. So I, just from a designer standpoint, I want to get into this, get my hands on this thing, and really pour over it, because I feel like I feel like we've missed a really starring actor here that we have to examine. So
I agree, and that's the beauty about this list,
isn't it?
And we hope that folks that are watching this and finding this on YouTube later are like, "Well, I never heard of that. I'm gonna go check it out," or "I've never heard of Veiled Society, or I didn't think it was any good or something.
Yeah.
It's like, I want to go check it out. Obviously somebody thinks it's good because it made this list. Not that this list is the end all be all, but it's just like, when, like you said, when you start poking around on the
Mhm.
internet, because if it's on the internet, it's got to be true. Everybody keeps saying that the Enemy Within is one of the best, most classic adventure campaigns out there, and it's like, regardless of the system. So I want to see how they did it. I want to see what they did, how they got there. I know I'm going to miss some of the nuanced parts of the Warhammer world, because it's very steeped in the world there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just fascinates me,
Yeah.
and I get so excited. I'm kind of like, oh my god, I wish Christmas was next week. And I'm like, it's like, because I want this, so I
Yeah.
want to. So, but Bug Professor is in the building.
There he
You missed
is.
me. You missed it earlier, Bug Professor. I made the statement. I'm
Give you a
coming.
shout
I'm
out.
coming to Pennsylvania. It's like, you can't stop me. My house is sold. I can't turn back now. I have no place to go but to Pennsylvania. Here I come. So, anyway, yeah, so this is just a fascinating
It is.
a thing. Like you said, I love that grubby fantasy. I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to that. Just firearms, apparently. I do remember that from
It's
Warhammer
yeah, it's
miniatures
Warhammer's
games. So
very one of the other quotes I had heard, which again I think is fitting, is I remember reading somebody said something like Warhammer RPG is one of those things where you go in thinking you're playing D&D and end up thinking you're playing Call of Cthulhu, you know?
yes, yes,
And you get that vibe from this product, whether it's
yes.
from the handouts or even the cultists or whatever, and the kind of agents of chaos, and there's definitely that dark element going on in here, not just grittiness, but there's also kind of the whole cult thing and all that kind of stuff going on in mutants, and it's definitely a different animal. It's kind of very inspiring to read something this different.
Yeah, agreed. Forgot to mention that. Yeah, like that director's cut has like all the handouts as separate pages that you can literally in full color, that you can already in a
Wow.
little fancy envelope, apparently, that goes
Huh.
into the slipcase and comes right out, and you just hand them out. Oh yeah, I'm just like, I almost want it, because I want to like look to produce something like that. I want to do a director's cut. I in my head now, I'm like, ooh, Castle White Rock director's cut. I'm like, that could be
Mhm.
something. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but anyway, yeah, just yes, the blunderbuss. Yes, the blunderbusses. That's the guns at the dwarven armies. He says, yeah, again, my Blood Bowl background a little bit here. So yeah, so that is the shadows over Bogenhafen. Did I get that right? Bogenhafen? Bogenhafen.
Bögenhafen. Yeah.
Bogenhafen. All right, hopefully. I can't pronounce it. I'm from Boise. What can I say? So there you have it, folks. Quick recap. Number 35, B6, The Veiled Society. Number 34, DCC RPG rears its head on our list, Sailors of the Starless Sea. Number 33, D3, The Vault of the Drow, more of a setting than an adventure. Maybe it would have been higher. Number 32, excited to hear N4, Treasure Hunt, making on our list. And number 31, Shadows over Bogenhofen.
An
I don't
interesting
know.
list for tonight, for sure.
Yes, it was a fascinating list, and that's it. We are officially going to be in the top 30 next
Wow.
show.
Yeah, we're
Rick,
getting down to it.
tell them what you got to tell them, Rick.
All right, folks. Well, as always, we are thrilled you could join us. Please, if you enjoy what you've watched, give us a follow, give us a like. If you're not subscribing already, you're on YouTube and you're watching us there, go ahead and subscribe, please, because it helps us. And please keep those comments coming. We love reading your comments during the show, and we read every comment on YouTube later. So keep that input coming. It helps shape the show and let us know how we're doing and that kind of thing. And we'd like to hear your picks too, frankly. I love reading when you folks put up, what you think should have been number 30 or whatever. So keep that coming. Our next show is coming to you Sunday on June 30th, again at 8 p.m. And we're going to dive into the 30. We're going right into number 30 and then down into the 20s. So super exciting.
getting serious. It's getting
Yeah, we're getting
serious.
down to the
Moving on
gritty
now.
nitty, as they say on Are You Being
Yeah.
Served? So
Yeah, so it's getting exciting. So thank
yeah,
you everybody for tuning in or watching us on YouTube later on. We are looking forward to the next show. Before you know it, it's going to be here. So everybody have a great rest of your holiday weekend and start to an amazing summer. And we will see you guys next time. Have a good night.
likewise.